All right, sounds good. Well, thanks to all of you for joining us for our last roundtable discussion of 2020. This one, we are sort of recapping. We're going to have a small business focus, and we're recapping with business owners or leaders of small businesses that we've talked to over the past 9 months in a section called Coping with COVID. So almost every issue, I think, going back to mid-April, we featured at least 3 profiles of small businesses in the West Michigan area and, across a variety of sectors to just get a feel for how they're managing these past 9 months and what their outlook is like. So that's what we're doing here today. We've got a great panel representing a variety of sectors. And first is Jonathan Jelks, who's co-founder of Ambiance Kitchen and Bar, Motu Viget Spirit, GRUSA, Midwest Tech Project. He's an entrepreneur with his hands in a lot of different activities. So we've also got Alita Kelly, who's the co-founder of Southeast Market, which formed in Grand Rapids earlier this year. Carl Kowalski, who's president of 7 Generations Architecture and Engineering down in Kalamazoo. Carl joined the firm back in September. We spoke to the previous president, I think it was back in May or so, but we'll talk with Carl and sort of get an update on how the firm's been managing in this time. And also Alicia Locke-White, who's the founder and CEO of Little Space Studio in Grand Rapids, a co-working space. So lots of great perspectives. We'll start in alphabetical order and start with you, Jonathan. When we first talked early on, you had you were kind of experienced a little bit of everything based on the companies you were involved with. But, where are you at now? And, how have you sort of characterized the past 9 months as an entrepreneur in Grand Rapids?
Yeah. Wow, the range of emotions that, I felt during the last 9 months. And I think, you could kind of feel that in some of the quotes that I gave to my biz. It's just been all over the place. Obviously, we've experienced like apocalypse now, real quick and in a hurry with COVID-19 and the pandemic. And the businesses in my portfolio and the things that I'm a part of, it's been the same. With Ambiance, it turned into one of our most triumphant achievements. Obviously, we're excited to diversify the entertainment options downtown. We think that we're bringing something unique to the DNA of what's been downtown. We have one of the more anticipated projects for a small business in the last 20 years with the media mentions and whatnot. Being obviously, an African-American liquor license business in the heart of the city and the main artery there of Grand Rapids. And just not being able to open has been extremely frustrating. The things that we've had to deal with is we've had to pay rent. We've also had to deal with, our financing and, challenges with the finishes as far as construction. So, having a bar, kitchen, restaurant being 80% complete, but being in this purgatory, being in this limbo as to strategically when is a good time to open. That's been the most challenging aspect of that. So you're obviously paying out expenses with no clear path as to when you'll be able to generate some revenue. And then there's all these new HR protocols, in order to keep people safe that we've had to take under consideration. We've had to learn it at a very quick pace. So it's when you talk about entrepreneurship and the excitement of it, and how much courage it takes. You never really know until you're faced with challenges. And, personally and professionally, I've never been faced with challenges like this during the past 9 months.
Mm-hmm. What's the status of Ambiance right now? I mean, is it pretty much built out, ready to go?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's ready to go. We're looking at late February because, again, the governor has shut us down this month. And so we're thinking that towards March, we'll have a better opportunity, to open, and, there'll be some vaccines and people all know what they need to do in order to, ensure safety for humanity. And so we're excited. I mean, the status is the same. We're going to open when it's strategically sound to open. And what we've had to do is just dig into our pockets, dig into cash reserves. Luckily, I have a diversified portfolio. Luckily, I have great team members, fellow founders who have diversified portfolios. And so we were able to make some sacrifices and work with, the people that we're dealing with in order to, make sure that our business is able to survive. A lot of our friends, a lot of other small businesses that we know within the ecosystem are going the way of the dodo, man. They're not going to be around next year. The hospitality industry in particular has been adversely affected by COVID-19. And there's really no way of getting around that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, you certainly touched on a few topics I want to get back to with each of you. But Alita, I think Emma, I spoke with you. You were very much still in the startup phase, I think, of Southeast Market. You were still focused on sort of a food delivery type option. But since then, there's been some pretty nice press coverage of your efforts and your business partners' efforts in this. How have things progressed for Southeast Market in terms of the business's development and where you're at based on where you initially set out?
Totally. So when this concept was coming to fruition, we really thought that we were going to be looking at a space like late next year, but because the pandemic has pushed us into really leaning into like delivery curbside and people needing groceries, because they're not going out as much, it's really accelerated our whole operation.
Wow.
So in the way that the pandemic has slowed other places down, it's directly, like inversely sped us up. So we're just leaning into that right now and honored to be able to, we're looking at hiring folks right now in a time where like getting a job is so difficult, and providing these resources of healthy food to people who are immune compromised or compromised just by being in this zip code and having dealing with health disparities. So it's really interesting to have this perspective of the pandemic speeding up our business, but we're grateful to do the work. So.
Mm-hmm. And so what's the status now? Do you have a storefront that's open to the public, or how are operations working right now?
Sure. So I'm in the store right now. Our grand opening date is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, January 18th of 2021. And that's when we'll be open to the public. We're working right now with a small cohort of 30 families who made financial commitments to shop with us from early October when we got started until the end of this calendar year. And that gives us the chance to figure out how to put together our operations and really fine tune our system so that we can open well next month.
Mm-hmm. And you're located on Grand Rapids south side, southeast side. Why was that an important location for you?
Sure. So it's important because I live here. I've owned my house here a half mile from the store about 5 years. Both of my parents are from here. My grandma died here of heart disease, of, diabetes. So like, it's very close to my heart. And I felt this responsibility because of the privilege I received from going to school and getting, this scholarship and learning all these things about health disparities. I felt this social responsibility to come back and afford all of the knowledge that I receive and pour it into my community on behalf of us thriving. So.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep moving then on this opening round. Carl, so you were appointed or hired back in early September, I think it was, as president of Seven Generations. What's it been like taking over the day-to-day of a construction and engineering design firm, 6 months into a pandemic?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time to make a big career shift and join the team. Onboarding, at that time we were partially in the office. So we basically have half of the firm in the office at any given time. Back in September, people were working about 2 or 3 days a week in the office and about 2 or 3 days a week at home. So just onboarding and getting to meet people, making human connections with people. We talk about having, micro impressions and things that are happening on a daily basis that you don't get in organized Zoom calls or Teams calls or things like that. Just, walking around the office and, having a quick conversation. So that part has been, we've had to be the most intentional about, is just how do we get together outside of the work. I think, since we've been dealing with all of this since March, we've gotten a pretty good handle on how do you do the client work, how are you engaging clients, how are you designing, how are you able to be creative when we're used to doing all of that in person. And now the focus has been much more on how do we engage each other, and how do we, now that it's not 1 month and it's not 2 months and it's not 6 months and it's not 9 months, how do we continue to build on that without, getting fatigued by, another Teams call or another, group meeting on Zoom. So that's been kind of the biggest focus, is sort of building the community of the team. We have about 45 people that work here in Kalamazoo. And so not being able to get in a room and just have a conversation has been an interesting challenge.
Right. Yeah. And how about the workflow itself? Your firm is involved with, federal contracts, work with Native American tribes. How about the workflow itself? Have you noticed, has there been bottleneck with some types of projects? Have others, started to come in?
Yeah, it's been, we have diversity in a couple of different fronts. Geographic diversity, a lot of our work isn't in Michigan. We are, like you mentioned, we do work all over the country for the federal government. We do work all over the country for tribes. And so we're not, every location is a little bit different in how rural they are, density of population, and then the different project types and how they're funded. We're super fortunate to have a lot of projects that just continued. They were government funded projects or projects that the tribe had already earmarked money for, so we were able to keep those going. And at the same time, because of those relationships that have been built, we've been called on by a lot of our clients to help them get through this. So, an example is we have a project in Lincoln, Nebraska, where a tribe was able to get CARES Act funding to develop a new clinic outside of Omaha in Lincoln to provide, closer access to care for the tribal citizens that are around Lincoln, Nebraska. Accelerated schedule, had to leverage a lot of technology to scan the building and design collaboratively when we aren't necessarily there in person as much as we would normally be, to allow them to leverage, access to grant funding that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. So it's been a mixed bag. It's been very busy in the latter part of the year, kind of continuing into next year. So we've been super fortunate that way.
Okay. And remind me, 7 generations, is it about 30 people with the firm?
We have about 45 people here in Kalamazoo.
Okay.
Like I said, so as we opened up the office over the course of the summer and fall, not everybody's ever been in the office at the same time. It's been a pretty good mixture. But since our work has been, a lot of it has been across the country and remote anyway, we've had to work on workflows that allow us to communicate with clients without traveling. So that part has been pretty efficient.
Okay, great. All right, and Alicia from Little Space Studio in Grand Rapids. I think early on, your initial goal was to open your space in March, was it?
You got it. So
So
yeah,
what happened? Where where are you at now?
happy to share the experience. I just want to say thanks for having me on. I feel like I'm in the room with a very similar community of experiences. Very sharing a lot of sentiments with everyone in the room. So it really depends. I'm glad you're asking me now, first off, rather than even 3 or 4 weeks ago or 3 or 4 months ago. So I just want to just want to say that, because the main experience that we have been pulled through is that the reality of our business and where we are and what to expect and coming out of it. This is very high level, but it changed so rapidly. I think that was the constant stressor throughout the entire time. I mean, it's stressful enough, but from a leadership standpoint, I think one thing that needs to be brought to attention is just what happens when you build this team and then suddenly everything comes to a halt. And so we had to make tough decisions early on in March when we had a shutdown. And but then as we grew throughout the year and pivoted our direction, I'll get into that in a second. We built a team that we could retain as effectively and as affordably as possible, because we had so many people in our community that were hurting, and people were just losing opportunities left and right. So it was like first damage control, and then how can we kind of persevere through the next 6 to 12 months. So for context, we're a creative co-working space. We support business professionals that are part of the gig economy. So anyone who is primarily or at least partially freelancer based, there's a lot of support that doesn't necessarily just come with being a freelancer, right? So it's business support, everything from workflow to retirement, figuring out how to build a career for yourself when your skill sets are not necessarily hireable. You have to hire yourself, right? So supporting our community through this time has been absolutely heartbreaking. We've seen businesses close left and right, and not just our storefronts and our great community. Our businesses on South Division in the Harris building, and but at the same time, we had people who were had to just completely shut down the type of work that they were trying to do and try to find other types of work. And many of them have not been successful. So when we were about to open, we were about to roll out membership, because we're a membership-based organization. Everything all of our products and services that we design and build are built for a membership, primarily and secondarily for our larger community, for ongoing education and research and business support. So not being able to launch membership was pretty hard. We were right in the middle of our second construction project. We had just finished up one. We have 2 floors of the building, and so the first floor was up and running, and we were just starting to pull people in. And then the second floor, which is actually the top floor, our second floor has our basically our 24/7 membership, where they just really claim the space as their own office. And that's where a lot of our membership was excited to go. And so that was completely halted. We also, up until about January, February, were completely bootstrapped. We had not had any external investment, and we were on our way to securing investment for that construction project, which we then lost. So then we went through the summer continuing to bootstrap, and very fortunately we're able to get a hold of some grants and a PPP loan. But I mean, just to retain the staff and the projects that we were doing to get to that point of making money again. And so I'm very happy to say, even just 3 weeks ago, we finally secured our first major investor. And it took this long. So I actually spent almost the entire summer pitching. And you know what? I mean, co-working, regardless if you're familiar or not, it's just not popular right now. So taking in the reality that our our industry has fundamentally changed, but because we're serving creatives, we got really, we were really agile in realizing how we could pivot some of our business models. We are now teaching our entire team how to produce live stream stuff, and we just launched our fully professional recording studio that you can book, and we have a full sanitizing process around that. So there's things that we definitely had to take time and pace ourselves at launching them because we were so tight on funds. But at the same time, it allowed our membership to kind of see under the hood and to kind of come along with us and see us build like piece by piece. So it was a really unique community building experience for everyone involved as well. And actually, out of this experience, we launched a digital membership, which we did not intend on doing at all, and it ends up being like one of the best outcomes out of this situation, because people are able to get on our platform as a member, and then when as things become safer, as spaces become safer to occupy again, they can slowly build up into the membership that they really want. Because the reality is that everybody's to their best ability working from home, but it's not meant for everybody. And it's never, for some people, it's never been meant for them. So we're committed to staying open and accessible as much as possible.
So you see a future for co-working spaces going forward. Oh, I think I froze up.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. I think that I froze up on my end. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. No problem.
Go ahead.
Okay. So realizing that larger companies are condensing or even getting rid of their offices, people are still needing and desiring that office space. And for us, for creatives, when it's so hard to network in the beginning anyway, working in a space along with other creatives allows them that organic networking, that intentional networking that happens when you get to meet other people in your industry. So we are actually getting even more requests now for office space and for memberships. And we are actually, we're up to 55 members already. And most of them are digital, but a lot of them are waiting for the our second floor to open. And once that's open, a lot of those memberships will upgrade. So we've had incredible interest on a lot of different fronts. And in fact, one of our new major partnerships is Local First. They have actually had to condense their office space. And so they are all now working out of Little Space. Obviously right now, most of them from home, but utilizing our digital community and utilizing our resources as well. To the best of our ability that we can provide for them. So yeah, I'd like to also make a point that I think that the others in this call can relate to this, but like when you're surrounded by people who are struggling, you get really, really creative to meet people's needs. So a lot of what we've bootstrapped has been based on partnerships, trades, a lot of I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine, but it's been in a mutual respect fashion to get everybody even just the basic level of support they need to keep their businesses and organizations going. Because what's unique for us is that we don't just represent our own business, we represent dozens of businesses, and all of those businesses need support right now. So it's a quite an undertaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's great. It's great to hear things are continue to move forward for you. So you mentioned some challenges with financing that you had. Quick show of hands, have all of you gone through the PPP process, or did you attempt to, or 1, 2? No? Okay. For Carl and Alicia, I guess, Carl, we'll start with you. It's, I guess, how did that process go from, the time when it was opened up and really just sort of unleashed for small businesses and really something new to where it's at now? Have you gotten much guidance from the federal government on, the process for getting that forgiven, or from the banks? How has the PPP process gone for you?
Yeah, so for us, the process started before I joined the firm. Because I joined in September, but one of the advantages, we're super, as a small business, fortunate to be part of a larger holding company. So Manoba Modson has several companies in their portfolio, and being able to leverage and share like this kind of conversation with business leaders across a bunch of, and there's seemingly not necessarily related business types, but are all kind of sitting in the same boat. They're all small businesses that are growing and evolving and trying to figure it out. So what we did was really leverage each other in access to banks. Our CFO really led the process and kind of trying to help understand, okay, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for each one of our businesses? What do we need? How does it fit how we are impacted? And what is it, what kind of flexibility does it allow us to do? Back when it started, it was pretty unknown what the consequences were going to be for the design and construction industry. So for the most part, that's where we've been able to, we've been fortunate to be able to leverage is kind of our internal group of resources.
Mm-hmm. And Alicia, was that was that helpful for your business? Was the process how was the process? You're kind of smiling about it.
Oh, I have a very love-hate relationship with banks. We are very unique, and after about 1.5 years, just realizing we're very difficult to fund, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. Thank goodness we found an investor. But actually, we were a part of the second wave. We tried very hard to be part of the first wave, and we just couldn't make our bank. We just couldn't make it work with our bank. I think they were just having a really tough time balancing. So we tried a couple other banks and just completely opened a new account with another bank that was able to get us in. So that happened probably back in August. Was a huge relief for us. It allowed me to retain staff that I was very nervous about holding on to. And so that was just awesome. And then we also, in a company to this, we went through the long process with Grand Rapids Opportunities for women, and we're able to get a loan from them. And that was like kind of the other piece that really helped us, because even though it was startup capital, it still allowed some of that overhead, because they had been so busy processing a lot of COVID related loans. And so that was also, it took a minute, but it was still a lot more responsive than a bank. So yeah, it was a bumpy ride trying to figure out all that. And as a startup, we don't have business credit. I have okay credit. It's like when you're there are just a lot of barriers there. So yeah. Can kind of do a talk on it now. I'm sure a lot of us can.
Right. Well, certainly now, there's, it seems like regardless of how sort of people feel about, at least in Michigan, the latest sort of restrictions on business, certainly not limited to Michigan, but it seems like everyone agrees that Congress needs to step up here and support small businesses. Jonathan, I guess I'll turn to you as, a restaurateur as part of your sort of portfolio. Is that something, you're calling for as well as, if there is a need for relief or for some sort of grant or loan funding from the state or federal government, is that something you see the need for, and what does that look like?
Yeah, for the industry overall, definitely. The industry obviously needs more support. Small businesses are just getting killed. I think I said before, I forgot if it was to you guys, but this is kind of like reverse Darwinism. It's unnatural selection. It's hard enough to be an entrepreneur in the first place, but to have to deal with these kinds of challenges, it is something that you didn't plan for. And so any support that, the feds can can do when, they know that, small businesses are pretty much the backbone of the country, of the economy. I think they should do that. We weren't eligible for any of those loans because we weren't in operation with Ambiance. So Ambiance wasn't, eligible for that type of support. But I definitely think that, there's advocacy needed for small live entertainment stages, all that kind of stuff, whether it's a business like the Pyramid Scheme or the Intersection. I'm thinking about all these places that have been central to our community and so much of a part of, just our everyday lives, and them not being able to be open at all because of the amount of people gathering in the space has just been killing. So I'm definitely in favor and am hoping for more support for businesses in hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody can't be saved. I mean, that's
right.
The tough part about it is a lot of people are just going to go out of business. And some of those businesses will surprise you, because they've been staples and they've been our go-to spots. But they're just not going to be able to make it because, in business period, a lot of people are hanging by a thread.
Mm-hmm. Alita, do you foresee a need, for additional support for maybe your business in particular, or for, others that are sort of in the same sector as you?
Definitely. There's something to be said about what is birthed through this pandemic. So our business is really being accelerated because we're reacting to the pandemic too. So supporting businesses that are birthed because of this whole experience and who are trying to address issues associated with this pandemic is really important. But also specifically those that are talking about the health disparities that certain groups are experiencing, and groups that are more vulnerable to COVID. And so I hope that there's going to be some support for businesses like us who are providing tangible ways to support health. 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. So if you don't have access to healthy food, it's not looking so hot for you. And we knew that, but now it's amplified because you're seeing communities of color experiencing COVID at disproportionate rates. So I'm hoping that gets addressed through some government funding. And that's a piece of the work that we do at Southeast Market, talking about food sovereignty and addressing food policy. And so I hope that there's some policy that's born out of this, because it's really alarming how little resources the communities that are most vulnerable to COVID have.
Sure. And I'm wondering too, I guess, sort of dovetailing on the sort of the relief or, maybe aid side of the equation is, heading into the new year, how each of you are really anticipating sort of the cash flow coming up, and how do you really budget for, a new year at this point in time? Alita, you can start if you'd like.
Sure. So we're still building out a new business. So it's not like a pivot from something else. We're really just growing within the pandemic. So I think that it's not something that's different.
Yeah.
Than last year.
Right. Yeah. Carl, how about for your firm, and how you're anticipating 2021 revenue?
Yeah, I think it's in the construction industry, it's pretty lumpy in what market sectors are moving forward, what aren't, because we are a trailing business support service. So, businesses need to be thriving and growing in order for our work, and then construction then trails design. So it's been a little bit lumpy that way. I think our individual outlook for 2020 or 2021 is pretty optimistic for the first half. In terms of what we anticipate continuing to move forward. projects that we know have been funded, but a lot of the private sector work or community-based work is on hold and is going to continue to be on hold. So it's one thing if you're working for an institution or you're working for a government agency, but a lot of the businesses that we work for, or community groups that we work for, we are servants to the kinds of businesses that are on this call, and we have to do everything that we can to try and support the work that they're doing. So it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. Like I said, we're pretty lucky that we have some things set up for the beginning of the year, but I don't know that anybody can look much past 3 or 6 months from now in terms of what the balance of the year looks like.
Right. Are you seeing that same sort of thing, Jonathan? Is it kind of a short-term approach is all you can really do right now for 2020?
Well, yeah, with the bar, obviously, it's you just don't know how things are going to land, and so what we've tried to do is give ourselves enough runway so that, hey, if we need to open up in the summertime, that's what we'll do. And so we did the pivot, the word that everybody's been using for the year, and we kind of stashed some acorns so that we can make sure that we can, if we need to hibernate all winter, we can, come up with the groundhog and, kind of take advantage of the opportunities when people are coming back outside. With some of our other businesses, kind of like Alita was saying, we've seen great momentum. So our spirits company did a deal with Meyer, which got put on hold. Initially, we were going to be in Meyer in about the springtime, and it got put on hold until late summer. And so it was a massive deal for us. We're now available in about 60 stores within their portfolio, and that puts us at 260 stores overall for where our products are being served. And, obviously booze is Teflon, in times like this, people are, still consuming alcohol. And so, I feel like it's kind of like prohibition times, like we're making money in other areas. And it's been good. We've been able to flourish, and the marketing is going well, and there's been great enthusiasm for our products on the market. So things like that, we have projections and we know where we're going to kind of land. Real estate stuff, where you're going to kind of land. You may have to make some adjustments, but it isn't the wholesale pivot that we have to do with the bar. The bar is like the great thing in our portfolio that everybody's so excited about, but it's kind of like the elephant in the room for us at this point, because it's like, when are we going to be able to generate revenue with it? But yeah, that's how it's going for us.
Okay, great. Okay, I also wanted to jump back to something you said, Jonathan, in your opening what sounded like you kind of had to go through a crash course of learning about like government regulations and work sites or workplace safety type stuff. Can you sort of follow up on that a little bit? And we'll talk with each of you about how you've, had to deal with this. We certainly have had to do so with our office, but what's that been like? What are some of the things I guess you learned about that you really didn't really consider about, workplace safety, things like that?
Well, I mean, we just didn't think about any of it within this context. If you look at some of the businesses that have been penalized for having too many people in their spaces throughout the COVID-19 when they were allowed to open, that we've seen some cautionary tales that, we don't want to follow the example of. Contact tracing, taking people's temperatures, who can do that? What's a violation of one's constitutional rights with the mask? There's been a crash course that has had to happen in order for us to, kind of embark on this entrepreneurial journey. And so luckily, we haven't had to test it out. We've gone to places and visited different restaurants and bars during this time and, been able to kind of do our field research on who's doing what effectively, what practices we absolutely need to have in place versus the ones that are a preference. Just in seeing some of the restaurants have to close down and some of the bars have to close down for a day or two after somebody contracts COVID-19, and how long your staff needs to be out. All those things are things that we have to take under consideration now. And so we and our team wasn't necessarily prepared for that initially. Like, who's a health worker, who's a part of the CDC. You have some people who are more well-versed in that on your team. Obviously, your management, will know HIPAA laws and, some of that stuff. But the way that this is going, we've really wanted to make sure that if we do open up, we're not, easily able to be a target to get sued.
Right. Yeah. Alicia, is this something that you've had to deal with as well at your facility?
Absolutely, yeah. Echoing a lot of sentiment, both previously about burying some acorns, definitely, and then, but then also adapting COVID procedures. It felt we had a little easier time, I believe, because it was our space functions as a traditional office space. So we had a hospitality component, but it was very limited to a kitchenette area and a couple other amenities. But then when you get into some of the unique amenities, we are really huge about arts and technology access. So we have a lot of materials in the space, like arts and crafting materials, technology, like different dongles and stuff that you can use while you're working, and then you have to give it back. So we actually created a bin system where anyone who comes in the space puts things in contaminated bins, and then our team processes them and gets them back on the shelves for other people to use. And also like sanitizing call booths and bathrooms in between use, and just there's just like little nuances that we definitely had to be creative with. But overall, where we had the most challenge is keeping a team functional and motivated, because so much of our work was very space dependent. So really allowing our staff permission to have more autonomy over their schedules. We are huge advocates for mental health support. So we really fold that into how we deal with issues or work through how we're developing a product or service, and even just the typical workflow of the week. So I think that it's important to definitely talk about how to adapt your business for COVID, but I think that a lot of us are even more affected by our day-to-day workflow, and that's where most of our innovation has come from, whether it's responding to member needs, because there's a lot of different ways that we communicate besides Zoom. We communicate on a Slack channel where our membership is. We have a Discord for more community-facing stuff, and having different channels to make people know that we are still accessible, and that we are still just ready to help on a whim, right? So that was it was a learning curve for us, 150%, and we're still iterating on it. And I am just amazed at our amazing membership, because we launched digital membership in July, and just how people have really stayed with us and gave us enough feedback. Everything we build is very user focused. So preparing for next year, to kind of transition to your new question, is that we are very fortunate to have a strong body of all different types of creatives, whether they're brand new or been in the industry for 20 years. They've all been giving us really solid feedback, and we've been having incredible research opportunities with them to see what opportunities can come out of 2021 that can be both beneficial for the membership, affordable, but also something that would help us float if membership is not our focus.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Alita? Have you had, much interaction, I guess, doing a lot of curbside and delivery type service with some of the workplace issues? But I would imagine, when your storefront opens to the public, this might be something you'll be considering.
Totally. Even though we have curbside and delivery set up, what we're noticing is that as other businesses are closed down or limited, a lot of our customers still want to come into the store and shop.
Uh-huh.
I think it's because grocery stores have been one of those things that they're always open and you can always go in and shop. It's an essential service. And so we're seeing that a lot of people still want to come in and they want to talk with us, and they want to feel community, because I think a lot of us are just starving for community. And so we are a space for that too. So we are prepared to just be open. In addition to having the curbside delivery option, which should mitigate some of like having too many people in the store at once, and also being able to serve people that are homebound or lack transportation. So that's one piece of it. Another thing that we're learning more about as we're preparing to hire more staff is that we need to have more people on call to work just in case someone contracts COVID, or to address the mental health needs of our staff. So that is something that we're learning a lot about right now as we prepare to get open.
Okay, great. And how about for you, Carl? Does Seven Generations, get involved much at work sites or job sites as opposed to the office? And I guess, how you've I guess had to manage some of these workplace restrictions, and to just add what others have said, how you're approaching mental health for your workers.
Yeah, I think the mental health part is spot on. I think several folks have mentioned nobody has led an organization through a pandemic before. So we're all figuring it out as we go. Our entire leadership team has worked really hard to be transparent and honest and say, look, we're gonna do this, we're gonna react to this, we're gonna try this, we're gonna get feedback. And as things change, we're going to change and we're going to evolve, and we're going to do everything that we can to, to accommodate and to share, information as it comes in. What we've said from the beginning is, as we've been able to come back to work and come back to the office, our goal is to make the office space the safest place that you can be outside of your house. Because I think Alicia brought up, not everybody is wired to work from home all the time. And so if, we have folks who, have 5 kids at home and a spouse that's working, or they live by themselves. And so for us to be able to provide a safe place for them to come and work, it may be the only place that they go other than their house. If they get their groceries delivered or they do curbside pickup, this might be it. And so we've worked really hard. It's evolved. We did I think Jeremy mentioned in the last interview, we underwent some pretty significant changes in our office to build partitions where we didn't have them before, to build lockers for everybody, workplace policies, I think as Jonathan mentioned, how are we doing checks when people come in the door? How are we contact tracing, things like that. On a construction site, as construction has continued to move forward, all of our construction partners they always have had safety protocols in place. And so this has just been an additional safety protocol, wearing a mask, doing a scan when you get there. But like everybody else has mentioned, we're figuring it out as we go. And at this point, before the current restrictions were back in place, it felt like we got to a pretty good rhythm. We were getting to a balance of working in the office and working at home. So people kind of were able to self-identify. Some people wanted to come into the office 4 days a week. Some people wanted to come into the office 2 days a week. And we sort of empowered everybody to do that. We've used all the channels that we have to communicate in every way that we can to try and organize collaboration sessions and organize meetings and a lot of different, test out a lot of different things. So It's been echoing a lot of what everybody else said.
Yeah, great. Well, I guess we can sort of wrap up now. And, it really is hard to believe that it's 9 months now that, I remember coming into the office that week in March where it was like, there's really no idea how long this is going to go. And here we are 9 months later. there's vaccines starting to make their way onto the market. There's a new administration coming in at the federal level. So I'm just curious what each of yours level of optimism is for 2021, or if you're full of pessimism too. That's that's certainly understandable too. But I guess just to maybe sort of generalize the financial outlook for 2021, just maybe more broadly, sort of how you're feeling going into the new year, and we'll go backwards from alphabetical order that we started with. So, Alicia, if you want to get us started.
Sure. So I'm definitely split on it. I definitely have a very strong sense of optimism. I'll get into that in a second. My pessimism or concern going into 2020 is that, on one hand, everybody, like, it is insanely stressful. Everybody's dealing with it on different levels. And so that tends to bring a unique sense of community when it may not have been there before. But what it really does bring a light to is levels of privilege and security. And it puts a spotlight on what insecurities people had been already experiencing, and it just accentuates those. So that's a huge concern for my company and my greater community and all of our Grand Rapids communities going into this, is that we really need to pay attention to that. And we need to not get so caught up in, it's really important to support local businesses and support businesses as a whole. But if people can't even afford to go to those businesses, that's the underlying issue. So that's my caution going into 2021. The optimism, I believe, is really in, okay, I'll try to streamline this. I have a one way of talking about what businesses, like how businesses can survive, is that if they are really being mindful, listening to the community, listening to needs and desires, and are being very able to do the #pivot, right? I really, really believe that they are going to be the ones that are just going to skyrocket as we become more mobile again, as our environments become more safer. Because, man, it really brings to light the type of grit that leadership can have in this situation. And basically, if you can make it through this, you can make it through any type of business issue that you would have in the future. So I think it's actually producing some really strong leaders right now. I do want to put a caveat to that, because while I'm very for that argument, I am also very mindful that that some business owners are not going to make it. And I think that there should really be a very important level of grace that comes with that. That if your business does not survive COVID, it is not your fault. That it's okay. It's okay to just accept that. And because it may feel like your own personal failure, but sometimes, so much of a business's success is luck. So much being at the right place at the right time, knowing the right people, and you can't just base your business's success on metrics. So there's going to be so many businesses that close, like kind of referring to what Jonathan said, and we have to be supportive of those individuals who tried as hard as they could and couldn't make it work. That is, I think that part of 2021 is going to be a healing process for businesses who not only supported a staff and an employment community, but also the greater community that they served. And we need to be ready to support them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Carl, how about you? What's your outlook heading into the new year in a few weeks?
Yeah, I would echo a ton of what Alicia said. I think we also carry a lot of optimism into the year. I think the unknowns are a couple of buckets. I mentioned, we're a trailing industry, and we aren't exactly sure how other industries that have been impacted substantially by the pandemic are going to recover. What recovery looks like for them, how quick it is, how slow it is, the impact of vaccines and weather and all of that stuff that that will evolve over the course of the year. And so for some of our clients, it's a wait and see. It's we know some things are going to be moving forward, and we know some industries are moving forward, but at the same time, there are a whole lot of folks who are impacted, and we don't know when their growth is going to continue. So I would put it as a cautious optimism that, we're able to, I think, Jonathan has talked a lot about sort of diversifying and knowing and adapting where are you going to put your effort and energy today is different than where you're going to put your effort and energy in July. And we just try and spend a lot of time doing the best we can to figure out where those opportunities are. And to echo another point that Alicia made, we serve a lot of underserved, challenged communities with our tribal clients, and helping figure out where we fit into that and where the human element of design and what we do and how we can help impact, how we can help find grant opportunities has been, I think, if there's a silver lining is the wrong word, but if there is a point in here, the humanity point of going through a pandemic and really trying to reach clients and customers and say, how can we help? What is it that we can do? What are the skills that we have? What are the resources that we have? And I see that being hopefully sort of pivotal moment in how we all do business, and that people carry forward regardless of the pandemic, that we're all here to sort of serve the customers and serve the clients and help each other out while being in business, and that's part of it. But I don't know, that's been the kind of most impactful human side of what we're doing that I see continuing to move forward next year.
Mm-hmm. Great. Alita, what's your outlook like for 2021?
Well, I'm a relentless optimist, so I usually stay in that space. But I'm hopeful that because of the vulnerabilities to our food system that were exposed through COVID, people realize that no one is really safe when it comes to food security. And we saw, grocery stores were out of chicken, and that was anybody's grocery store. And so that pointed to, it opened up a space for us to have conversations about large scale agriculture and how smaller farms were safer. And so that's really what the future is when we're talking about another existential crisis, which is climate change. And that still will be around after the COVID vaccine is produced. So I'm excited that more people are open to talking about those conversations because they were touched by food insecurity because of the pandemic. And so their ears and their hearts are open to talk about some of the inequities within the food system and the vulnerabilities that were exposed. So I'm excited to continue having those conversations and do the work through Southeast Market to address them.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think the country, right, is having to look itself in the mirror and, kind of identify, who we want to be moving forward. Where is our soul, within all this, and so we're having a moment here, and it's a very important one. I think back to the riots that happened, downtown Grand Rapids, in regards to race and all the civil unrest and the protests. That was something that weighed heavily on my personal mental health, and not to the point where I wanted to do something crazy, but it's stressful when you see a community that you come from And obviously, you know, these challenges are here and the disparities are here. But, you know, you see people suffering, and you know what that whole fight for justice and, you know, equal rights has meant, you know what I mean, to, you know, said community. And so I've been very excited that there have been some real conversations with like corporate Grand Rapids where I live that, you know, haven't really happened before. There's been some reckoning, there's been some understanding, there's been some enlightenment about some of the practices that we have here that are extremely discriminatory. If you think about the lack of access to capital for African-American businesses, not just during COVID, but in general, right? You're more likely to get 50K from a bank to get a new Range Rover than you are, you know, for a business that is going to bring jobs and bring more prosperity to the community. We're still dealing with those issues. I mean, all that kind of comes to light. You know, people think that the civil unrest and, you know, what happened downtown Grand Rapids in front of my bar, coincidentally, you know, people think that that's just a result of, you know, police and community relations. But a lot of that, you know, in our area stems from the lack of opportunity. And so I think that that's been good. Like COVID has made us really, you know, look in the mirror and say, hey, we have some things that are going on systemically that aren't correct. And so out of that, there have been some new partnerships, some organic, some not so much, but the conversations are being had. And I'm looking forward to seeing corporate Grand Rapids. I'm looking forward to seeing the small business community. I'm looking forward to seeing like leaders and activists like Alita continue to contribute to that conversation and lead that conversation and actually have institutional support to be able to make real progress. And so that's something that I think will be a good thing. But business-wise, I think we know what we're dealing with to a certain degree, and we'll be able to find, you know, some calmer waters this year with new leadership at every level. And I think that we'll really be able to overcome. I've been very you know, communities that, you know, usually are underserved or are not in the know about the resources that they've received those. And so we have positive momentum, and I think we have to stay there and focus on the glass being half full in order to survive this thing.
Right. Excellent. Well, I think that's all I had for each of you, unless there's anything else any of you wanted to follow up on or address.
No, this was great. This is therapeutic. I appreciate being here with everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Agree completely. I mean, I think the optimism comes from this kind of conversation and everybody's, you know, leadership and approach to, you know, problem solving, figuring it out, and building community regardless of where you are. So yeah, I would echo that. Therapeutic is the right word.
Great. Excellent. Well, on behalf of MI Biz, I would just wanted to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to talk about your experience. I think it's very helpful to our readers as well, and I think they'll be very interested in what each of you have to say. So, thanks again. Best of luck to each of you in moving forward into the new year, and thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Danny.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.